Welcome back to another episode of Ash Grove's Forgotten History. Today, we're going to look at the area right behind me that was at one time known as Ash Grove's Union Park. You know, think about your story of Ash Grove and think about the first time that you came to visit Ash Grove. You know, how did you come into town? You know, for most of us today, we came via car. You know, a lot of people end up here in Ash Grove, you know, driving Highway 160 into town. Some people come from either F or V highways, you know, and all roads really do kind of lead to downtown here in Ash Grove. But that hasn't always been the case. When downtown was laid out, you know, it was laid out in the horse and buggy days. And a lot of our visitors to town came by train. And when you have people arriving by train, especially into a new town like Ash Grove, a very progressive town, you know, you want your visitors' first view of Ash Grove to be a positive one. And that's how the idea of Union Park developed. When you walk downtown today, you know, the depot is long gone, but that was really the central hub of downtown for so many years. You know, you think a visitor arrives to Ash Grove via the train, they get off, you know, they're there at the west end of Main Street, you know, just down from Rooted Soul Boutique and kind of across the street from the old car dealership and MFA, you know, that's where the depot laid. And, you know, there was a hotel district down there. And so it was a perfect storm, you know, with Union Park being this small, you know, kind of developed park at the time. It was bigger at one time. You know, there were buildings added on to the end of Main Street that have taken up, you know, parts of Union Park over the years. But when you look at old photos of Ash Grove, you notice that even during the street fair days, that, you know, the west end of Main Street was much bigger and much more prominent than it is today. And that's because of Union Park. You know, we have photos in 1898 of this huge flagpole that used to adorn the west end of Main Street. And there's a photo from 1898 showing, you know, that the flag was raised and a ceremony held at the during the Spanish-American War. And that's one of the earliest photos we have of Union Park. If you read through the early newspapers from, you know, the 1880s through the 1920s, you always see mentions of Union Park. And for a long time, I didn't know its location. They just talk about Union Park, but no one ever says exactly where it's at. Until one day, the editor writes, and he's writing toward the city because Union Park has become overgrown, you know, it's a little bit run down looking, and he says, you know, we shouldn't let the first thing the visitors see at Ash Grove be this rundown park. And that's when we get our first glimpse of Union Park's location. And then when you start building upon all these photos we have of the west end of Main Street, we can really start to understand what people meant by Union Park. And, you know, it gets its name, I think our best guess, from the large flagpole that was at the west end of Main Street. And there's also stories, and maybe some of our viewers can help us find a photo, but supposedly at one time there was a cannon at the base of that flagpole, and it may have been scrapped during the metal drives during World War II, but supposedly there's a photo of that cannon on the west end of Main Street. So Union Park really became, this beautiful, I won't necessarily say park like we think of the city park today, but it's an area, it's a gathering spot. 1912 stopped at the end of Main Street in Union Park, and he's on a presidential campaign. He wouldn't win that presidential race, but the train stopped there, and he addressed the community there. And we see, hundreds of people that have come out to see this train and to see the President of the United States, and he's there at Union Park. And of course, just down the hill to the south side of Main Street at one time, there was a lake. It was a little bit short-lived in Ash Grove's history. So, you can imagine people arriving via train. They get off the train, and they're in this beautiful kind of park-like setting where they can go down the hill and they can see the lake in Ash Grove. They can cross the street, and they can go to one of the handful of hotels that were there. There was a pharmacy across the street there. There was a billiards hall. There were places where you could get food on Main Street. And, it's really a welcoming spot, much different than we know downtown today. By the 19-teens and the 1920s, Union Park had seen its ups and downs, and the city decided to hire a landscape architect from Springfield to come down and try and fancy up, this first view of Ash Grove. And in the newspapers of the time, when this gentleman's working on the park, they're talking about all the different things he's doing in Union Park, all the different and exotic plants that he's planting, and how fancy this space was going to be. And then we see the Ash Grove Garden Club stepping in to help them maintain Union Park. And it's not until almost 1930 when automobiles start to arrive downtown, and then of course passenger service would eventually be discontinued in downtown Ash Grove, that we finally see Union Park start to slide from memory. There was a public water fountain that was installed at Union Park at one time. That was removed in the late 1920s. A location unknown, unfortunately, but it said it was removed to another location in the Ash Grove Commonwealth. And that's really when we start to see Union Park kind of just become an open space like we know it today.